one of the temptations we all face as investors is the temptation to time the market. We see something scary that we think is going to happen, and you ask yourself, well, why wouldn't I sell some of my stocks and go to cash during this period? And the reason you don't is it can have devastating impacts on your portfolio. I don't want that to happen to you. So take a walk with me and let's talk about this. And I want to share with you at the end of the video, I'm gonna share what I think is the most important takeaway on timing the market, which is what you should do instead of timing the market. So be sure to stay until the end. Okay. So why is market timing so hard to get done successfully? Why don't you just go to cash? And let me start off with sharing with you that there's nobody that I know in the investment industry that has successfully timed the market more than once or twice. And you'll always hear in the news somebody that, made a call just before the 2008 financial crisis or something like that. But you don't see that person around during the next crisis that takes place. And the reason you don't is because they didn't get it right the second time. So, and one other antidote, one other piece that kind of just shares how difficult it is to get this right. The founder of Vanguard, which is a low-cost exchange-traded fund platform that's really known for pioneering low-cost investment vehicles. The founder of Vanguard is a guy named John Bogle. And John Bogle famously said, I don't know anybody that's successfully timed the market, and importantly, he doesn't know anybody that knows anybody that has successfully timed the market. So if it's hard for professionals to do, why is that? And maybe, there's just something that we don't have that the average investor does have, right? Maybe we lose something as we start doing this for a living. So let's talk about why it's so hard. And I'm going to share with you, I think you have a 1 in 8 chance of being successful when you try to time the market. And this is just high level. I don't have any statistical studies that I've done, but let me share with you why I think it's 1 in 8, and you decide whether this is relevant or not. So you have to get 3 decisions right in order to successfully time the market. First, you have to decide what's going to happen. I mentioned earlier the U.S. is there's a lot of chatter that the U.S. is going to go into a recession. Well, that may or it may not happen, right? We don't know. I tend to think that it's likely to happen, but again, I don't know. So I've got to get that first decision right. And let's say each of these 3 decisions, I have a coin toss chance of getting right. So first, you've got to get the decision right. Then you've got to think about what the stock market's going to do. So I think this scary event's going to happen. If it does happen, I think the stock market's going to go down. Well, sometimes scary events happen and the market doesn't react the way that you think. So that's another coin toss, 50-50 likelihood of getting right. And then the last one is you have to reverse that position at some point, right? Let's say your long-term asset allocation is 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and you say, I'm going to sell half of my stocks. Right? So now you're 30% stocks and you're 70% bonds. Well, unless that's the right long-term allocation for you, at some point you got to go back to the 60-40. So you've got to get that decision right. And I think you have a coin toss chance of getting that right as well. So just quickly the math, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, and 1/4 times 1/2 is 1/8. And I think high level, that's one of the big reasons why market timing is so difficult to get right. So let me give you a couple examples. And this is not a political channel, but there were people when Donald Trump was running for president in 2016 that said, gee, the economy is going to tank if Donald Trump becomes president. And they were very worried about that. And so maybe they wanted to go to cash to avoid what they saw was going to be a crisis, right? And so they got the event right, but what they missed was the stock market actually did really well under a Donald Trump presidency. And in fact, the very first day the stock market was up, it opened low. And I might be wrong. It might be the next day or, the very same week the stock market was up. I believe it was the same day. And then now you're in a bind because in the example I gave, you sold, 30% of your portfolio that was in stocks, and now you're in cash. And so when do you get back in, right? If you didn't like if you didn't like the value of the stock market and the idea of who was going to be the president before the election, well, imagine afterwards. Now the stock market is even more expensive. So you're in a bind. It's hard to get back in, and it works against you. So that's just one example. Again, this is not political. This is not a political statement. I just use that as an example. So it's hard to get these numbers right. So what should you do instead, I think, is really the important question. And really what you should do instead is the work that you do to protect yourself from things that you think could be scary and happening in the next 12 months. The things that you do to protect yourself are not the things that you're going to do when the crisis happens. They're the things that you do 2 years ahead of time, 3 years ahead of time, right? When COVID happened and it was very scary, a lot of people were asking their financial advisor, well, what are you doing to protect me from this? And the right answer was, what we're doing is the work that we did for you 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 3 years ago, when we came up with your long-term asset allocation. And this is painful, but in order to get the returns of the market, you need to stay in the market. It sure would be nice if we could avoid those scary days. But by trying to avoid the scary days, unfortunately, you also avoid some of the biggest days. And even if you take a 20 or 30 year period, boy, if you miss out on the 15 best days in the stock market, that's going to it can have a material effect on the quality of the quality of your life that your portfolio can support. It's going to have a negative impact, a meaningful negative impact on your portfolio. Even 5 years after the financial crisis, I still met people that went to cash in the scariest days. And, then the market rallied back, and they were in that situation that I shared earlier, that, they didn't like the market when it was scary and it was at the March 9th lows. Well, they sure didn't like what the value of the stock market was a year later after the lows. And it's easy to get caught in this trap where now you're in cash. So I don't want to see that happen to you. So hopefully you like this video. If you did, if you found it helpful, do me a favor, hit the like button, leave me a comment. I do read the comments. I find it super motivational. We're building a great community here. So thank you all that are leaving comments. And until next time, I'm Asul, encouraging you to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years. Remember, you're only young once. Use this time wisely.